This is how the workers at the bottom receive their food. Only a small scoop. Inside is poor quality mashed potatoes mixed with coarse cornmeal. Meanwhile on the boss's plate there is beef served again and again, and because he eats it every single meal, he has even grown sick of the repetitive delicacies. This is the gap between classes, and also a true portrayal of the lowest workers at the end of the Industrial Revolution. Not only that, some female workers with attractive appearances also endure direct harassment from the foreman, and Miriam is one of the unfortunate victims in this workshop. So under the foreman's signal, the two of them walk to a secluded place, where she is humiliated and violated at his will. In fact, no matter how times change, no matter what banner is raised, as long as a new economic order has not been established, women still become symbols of destruction while falling into decay. At the same time, when Tommy greets his coworkers, he accidentally swings his towel onto the spinning wheel, causing his entire arm to be dragged into the belt as he cries out in desperate agony. Seeing this situation, Esther decisively wedges a hammer into the bearing, finally forcing the machine to come to a complete stop. Then she quickly runs into the restroom to inform the foreman, who is in the middle of doing something shameful, about the emergency. When the foreman arrives at the workshop, he realizes that his negligent management has created an irreversible tragedy. While they are treating Tommy's wound, the boss, who hears the news, immediately orders someone to take the injured worker to the infirmary instead of a hospital with better treatment. For workers at the bottom, life is as insignificant as grass. At this moment the doctor is examining the physical condition of a newly arrived boy, and with a shout they carry the injured Tommy inside and place him on a wooden bed. Seeing Tommy's arm about to be ruined, the new boy was truly frightened.
Are you okay?
When Esther returns to the workshop again, most of the blood on the ground has already been cleaned up, but unexpectedly the foreman tells them to keep their mouths tightly shut.
You're apprentices, orphans, and bastards. No one will listen to you, so say nothing.
Under such cruel exploitation, there will always be someone who resists injustice. So after work, Esther hopes Miriam will step forward and reveal the foreman's evil face to the higher authorities, along with the cruel truth of how she has been humiliated many times. But facing her co-worker's decisive proposal, can the timid Miriam truly gather the courage to stand up? Night falls, and the two dorm supervisors hired by the factory preach every night before the workers sleep about the kindness of the boss's family. Then in the name of Jesus they urge these grateful people to rest quickly so they can report to work on time tomorrow. Perhaps this is the only moment in the day when everyone is truly free, and only in the darkness do the workers' souls truly belong to themselves. So Esther urgently wakes the other workers, hoping to discuss what happened today, but Miriam tells her to keep quiet. This makes Esther unable to understand why anyone would protect such a shameless foreman. At the same time, their raised voices attract the attention of the dorm supervisors, who order them that if they make another sound they will throw every one of them onto the street, because in truth they are disturbing the couple's sweet moment. But the workers are not influenced by the supervisors and continue discussing that shameless foreman. The sister tries to ask what exactly happened to her younger sister during the day, and faced with Miriam's silence, Esther reveals the truth.
When Tommy had his accident, Charlie was in the privy with his hand up a skirt.
Don't feel bad, Mim. Everybody knows he's a beard splitter.
See? You're not the only one. And we'll tell the visitors tomorrow.
Tomorrow higher authorities will come to inspect the situation, but Miriam believes she is only an apprentice worker, so how could she possibly bring down a foreman who is in the same pocket as the boss? Even the girl's own sister does not suggest making the matter bigger. The higher authorities also turned a blind eye, so they simply have no power to change anything. But Esther still does not think so and hopes that tomorrow Miriam will report the situation to the visiting inspectors. The next morning the inspection team arrives as promised, and the young master of the factory brings them to the workshop to begin checking the production area. And when Esther sees this, she feels a surge of anticipation inside her heart. Just as the inspectors begin asking questions, the foreman appears behind Esther, afraid that she might cause trouble, and in the end Miriam still does not speak her true thoughts. When lunchtime arrives, the factory deliberately replaces the mashed potatoes with dry bread and even puts jam in the bowls, making it impossible not to admire how well they handle appearances. At that moment, the inspector arrived and questioned a boy who was working there because his two sisters also worked there. Then the inspectors walked toward the boy's sister.
Is it good? The food?
Yes, sir.
What hours do you work?
6 in the morning till 8 at night.
With time off for dinner and breakfast, and hours are shorter in the summer drought when there's less water in the river.
Any complaints, Miriam? You're treated well by your masters, your overlookers?
At this moment Nim nods silently, acknowledging the kindness of the factory leadership, but seeing the girl remain silent, flames fill Esther's eyes and she bravely steps forward.
Ask Tommy Priestley if he's got complaints.
Tommy?
He's not actually here.
He's dead. Caught in a machine.
The boy I told you about. My wife's looking after him at home.
Did he tell you he only has an accident cause the overlooker was in the privy with his hands up Miriam's skirt?
If it's true, then it's an outrage and I won't stand for it.
Soon Miriam is called alone into the office, and the inspectors hope the girl will tell the truth about whether the foreman has ever done anything improper to her. The higher authorities maintain a zero-tolerance attitude towards such violations of discipline, but unexpectedly the girl's answer is no. Miriam's response surprises everyone, and then they send the girl outside the door. In order to make the truth more fair, they also call the foreman involved for questioning. Unexpectedly, when facing the leader's inquiry, the man directly admits his own behavior.
There is. Miriam denied it.
This is something the foreman did not anticipate, so he quickly fabricates a lie.
I was searching her to see if she had any bobbin waste about her. Some of them had it up the skirts.
Soon afterward, the foreman calmly returns to the workshop, and it is clear that the small disturbance just now has no effect on him at all. But Esther's situation becomes completely different, and it seems the days ahead will be very difficult for her. And all of this ultimately is caused by that girl who chose to lie. Not only that, because Esther exposed Miriam's shameful incident, the girl's sister Susanna defends her and believes Esther is just trying to stand out, ruining her sister's reputation, and the two begin arguing. Esther also clearly knows that even Susanna has been humiliated by the foreman, and she is carrying a child with no father. With that, the woman can only leave the crowd in shame. As for what Miriam actually said to the inspectors, Esther desperately wants to find out.
I lied. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. If you'd all backed me up, they'd have listened. They would have had to listen. I can't do this on my own.
Not a single person is willing to speak for justice, and they would rather continue surviving like this day after day. This is the way most of them choose to live. Esther wants to break the deadlock with all her heart, but it only produces the opposite result. In the days that follow, the lonely girl becomes the target of the foreman, and when Esther works overtime, that evil hand reaches toward her. The frightened Esther tries to explain that she is feeling unwell.
It's Ragwick, Charlie.
I don't believe you. Come into the privy and let's see your clout.
As the man attempts to go further, the girl can only hide behind the machines to avoid him. Yet the foreman has no intention of giving up. Besides, all the other workers have already left work, making this a rare opportunity. But at this critical moment, the technician suddenly returns to the workshop, saying he needs to repair the equipment. And this becomes Esther's lifeline. However, the foreman is clearly unhappy that his plan has been interrupted and tries to use his authority to order the technician to stop acting on his own. But the man believes this concerns the safety of every employee's life and that the foreman has no right to interfere.
Well, a little bit of danger keeps the workers on their toes. Makes them careless and lazy.
For the foreman, who treats life like a trivial game, the furious technician slams him straight to the ground, while the female worker quietly takes a wrench from the toolbox during the chaos. Soon the shameless foreman is completely intimidated by the technician's temper. After all, the technician was personally hired by the boss with a high salary, so even the usually arrogant foreman does not dare provoke him casually. But the foreman will never let go of the humiliation of having his plan ruined. Early the next morning, before the sun even rises, someone strikes the large bell in the factory yard, calling the workers to start work at 5 o'clock sharp. Yet today something strange happens. Not only has the rope been cut, even the chimes inside the bell have disappeared, leaving the timekeeper puzzled and clearly showing that someone has tampered with it. And all of this is deliberately done by Esther, who stole the wrench and intentionally broke the bell, simply to give the workers a rare chance to wake up naturally. Meanwhile, the young master notices that the employees have not arrived for work and anxiously rushes to the bell tower, only to find the timekeeper beating the hanging bell with an iron bucket, which makes him suspect someone is sabotaging the place. When the dormitory matron hears the bell, she immediately wakes the sleepy female workers. Soon the group of women, under the orders of management, finally arrive at the workshop before 8 o'clock, which is enough to lift everyone's mood. The morning work remains busy, and because Esther feels unwell, she plans to go to the restroom, but the foreman notices her again and follows her there, violently kicking open the restroom door without any regard for the girl's feelings, his vile expression revealing exactly what he intends to do next. The man then loosens his belt, and just as he is about to act recklessly, Esther strikes his most vulnerable spot with the wrench she carries. However, the man's painful scream attracts the young master. At that moment, the girl is still holding the wrench, which also marks her as the suspect who sabotaged the factory bell and disrupted work, an offense that could even send her to prison. Sure enough, Esther is prosecuted by the factory on the charge of damaging production. The girl does not avoid responsibility. She openly admits her mistake and takes the opportunity to describe the foreman's many crimes to the magistrate. At first, the man tries to argue, falsely claiming that Esther tried to seduce him, but when the judge asks the boss who was present at the scene, the young master, who had already covered for the foreman once before, does not dare protect his employee again in front of the authority of the law and instead admits that the foreman harassed female workers. Yet the magistrate does not convict the disgraceful man and simply suggests that the factory resolve the matter internally. Esther, however, is treated very differently. Because she deliberately damaged factory property, she must pay £4 in repair costs. But the girl has not even reached the age of 20 when workers begin receiving wages. Even more shocking, the contract provided by the factory owner shows Esther as 15 years old, while the girl is actually 17, raising the suspicion that the young master altered her birth date in order to extend her time as free labor. So after returning to the factory, the girl directly confronts the selfish young master and tries to clarify the truth that she is 17, but the man pretends not to understand and avoids Esther's questions, ordering the foreman to drag her back to her position. But can the girl truly let this go? Meanwhile, news of the foreman harassing female workers spreads throughout the town and damages the factory's reputation, so the young master finally loses patience and decisively dismisses the foreman who has made repeated mistakes. After that, life continues as usual. One day Esther runs into the technician again, and the man kindly asks about her background while revealing a secret. It turns out the young master altered the ages of many girls recruited from the workhouse on their contracts so the factory would not have to start paying them wages before they reach 20. Esther only knows that she was born in Liverpool and knows nothing about the rest of her family. So that night she tries to ask the supervisors who brought her from the workhouse, but the cruel couple refuses to tell her the truth and even jokes about her family.
Names often follow occupation, so your mother may have been a price. A cheap one, though.
This sparks a bold idea in the girl's mind. So Esther contacts another coworker who has also suffered greatly, and the two plan to escape together the next day and travel to Liverpool to search for her birth record. When the dormitory matron calls the girls to work the following morning, she suddenly discovers that Esther has already disappeared, and when she questions the other workers, everyone remains silent. Soon the matron's husband learns the news and reports the escape to the old lady of the factory before driving a carriage in pursuit. Fortunately, his judgment is correct, because the two girls are indeed on the road leading to Liverpool. When they see the supervisor chasing them from behind, the two girls immediately run down a hillside. After the supervisor loses their direction, they secretly circle back, successfully creating a diversion and even seizing the supervisor's carriage, leaving the old man standing there in miserable shock. Finally, the two girls no longer have to travel on foot and drive away with bright smiles on their faces. 2 days later, they arrive in the unfamiliar city, and Esther asks her companion to wait outside while she enters a local church that keeps baptism records. However, the scene inside is deeply unsettling. Many people stand there like slaves wearing chains, and when Esther curiously tries to ask about it, the leader scolds her for speaking too much. At the same time, the companion waiting outside the church has no idea that the supervisor has already tracked them all the way here. When he asks about Esther's whereabouts, Lucy does not reveal the truth and instead claims that the two girls have already gone their separate ways. Meanwhile, Esther waits for someone to search for her birth record, but the process goes just as poorly. There is no accurate information about her family here, so the girl can only leave the church. But when she steps outside, she finds that Lucy and the carriage are gone, and no matter how desperately she cries out in the streets, she can no longer find any trace of her companion. For a girl who has not eaten for 2 days, surviving in Liverpool is an extremely difficult choice. In order to fill her stomach and continue searching for clues about her identity, Esther even begs food from a street vendor. The man leads her into a warehouse and spreads several sacks on the ground, telling her that if she is willing to offer her young body, he will let her eat her fill. The girl initially refuses, but compared with the chance to stay alive, what does such an experience really count for? So she gathers her courage and lies down on the sacks, allowing the man to do whatever he wants with her. When it is finally over, all she receives is a small piece of dry bread. As long as she survives, there is still hope. So the girl posts notices on the city walls everywhere, searching for her family. At last her efforts bring a response. A neatly dressed pastor, after hearing the girl's story, says he keeps baptism records that include birth certificates and then brings her into his office. But just when Esther believes hope is right in front of her, a large hand suddenly grips her throat, because the supervisor has tracked her down. The news that a female worker escaped from the Gregg family factory has already spread throughout the town, and everyone wants to take advantage of it, which is exactly why the pastor betrays her. After receiving his payment, Esther's feet are locked in chains and she is dragged back to the factory by the supervisor like a slave. Such a cruel punishment is even admired by the young master watching from the window, but the technician who recently arrived cannot bear to watch. No matter how his girlfriend urges him not to interfere, the man whose heart is filled with justice always stands up for the people at the bottom.
Where do you think you are?
You can run faster than I can.
Jump into me, you guardian!
Hey!
Have you no shame? This isn't one of the slave plantations. This is England!
Now stop it!
Seeing the situation becoming more serious, Susanna tries desperately to persuade her boyfriend to calm down, but the man ignores everything, lifts the girl in his arms, and leaves this troubled place while promising to remove the shackles from her body. Such bold interference quickly drives the supervisor to complain to the young master, but at that moment an even more tragic piece of news reaches him. During the days when the supervisor was chasing the escaped worker, his wife who managed the women's dormitory finished checking the rooms and suddenly suffered a severe epileptic seizure, and because no one was beside her at the time, the dormitory matron died. After hearing such devastating news, the man mourns his wife while blaming all responsibility on Esther. Meanwhile, the young master decides to punish the escaped worker and actually orders her close friend Lucy to take scissors and cut off Esther's hair. The girl screams desperately, trying to awaken her friend's conscience, but the young master threatens that if Lucy refuses to cut Esther's hair, he will cut Lucy's own long hair instead. Under such pressure, the girl can only endure her companion's helplessness as Lucy slowly cuts away her long hair strand by strand. This is the tragic fate of workers at the bottom during the late Industrial Revolution. Before reaching the age of 20, they must give their labor unconditionally without receiving any proper wages. Even the contract they sign traps every worker in a world without basic human rights. Soon Esther's hair is completely shaved off, but the supervisor still refuses to let her go, in revenge for his wife's death, which he blames on the girl's escape, leaving no one to care for her. The cruel supervisor locks Esther in a room together with his wife's corpse. Facing the pale, lifeless face, the girl curls up in terror in the corner, not knowing when she will ever be released. On the other side, after dealing with Esther, the young master finally turns his attention to the technician. He orders his men to transfer the technician's girlfriend to work in another city. Susanna, who suddenly receives the news, is clearly overwhelmed and confused. She immediately returns to the workshop and tearfully says goodbye to her younger brother and her sister, who is still busy working. No one knows whether they will ever meet again after this farewell. Under the constant urging of the foreman, the woman sadly leaves her two family members behind. Fortunately, just as Susanna is about to be taken away by carriage, the technician notices her from a distance and quickly approaches to ask what happened. Facing such an urgent situation, the man thinks quickly and suddenly proposes to Susanna on the spot. He believes that only by doing this can he keep his beloved by his side. But what scheme is the young master really planning behind all of this? Soon the two of them come to the office and apply to the boss to stay under the name of marriage. If Susanna must be transferred away from here, the technician is willing to follow her as well. But the woman is carrying another man's child, so does he truly not mind at all?
I love her, and I'll bring up her child as my own.
We don't want to go. I want to stay here, and Daniel wants to finish your loom.
Facing such sincere determination, the situation actually fits perfectly into the young master's trap. The man then takes out a contract from the drawer and tells them that as long as they sign it, he will allow the couple to remain here. This contract is essentially a form of indenture, meaning the technician will lose his freedom and belong completely to the textile factory. Even though he understands the young master's malicious intention, he calmly accepts it in order to stay with his fiancée. Meanwhile, the imprisoned Esther has reached her limit. She is only a 17-year-old girl, forced to stay beside a body that is beginning to smell, and the situation places enormous strain on her mind. Her desperate cries for help finally bring a response. When Esther sees the young master's mother, she clings to her like a lifeline. The old lady indeed takes the girl outside. Those heartfelt pleas are difficult for anyone to ignore. Although the supervisor standing nearby is clearly displeased, he still does not dare challenge absolute authority when the old lady personally asks for mercy. Even though life remains miserable, poor Esther finally returns safely to the dormitory. She does not blame Lucy for cutting off her hair and still believes they are best friends. But one day Lucy's younger sister arrives seeking help from her sister, and everything changes again. The girl had been surviving alone in the poorhouse, with no one to rely on. Now she hoped to follow her sister to work at the same factory to earn enough for food and shelter. At first, the old factory owner felt pity for her and agreed to take her in. But when the young master arrives and sees the scars covering the girl's body, he immediately objects. He claims that the factory is not a shelter and not a place for the poor to beg for food. So he overturns his father's decision and orders the supervisor to send the girl back to the workhouse, even though her sister desperately begs the old owner to let the girl stay. After the young master takes control of the factory, the father seems like an outsider, and the supervisor takes the girl away. No one knows if she will ever see her sister again, and sadly the answer is no. On the way back to the workhouse, the supervisor suddenly stops the carriage and lies that the town is not far ahead, telling the girl to walk the rest of the way alone. He claims he has other matters to attend to and does not want to waste time. The girl does not recognize the road and hesitates to leave the carriage, but the supervisor shows an expression of disgust, lifts her down from the carriage, and abandons her there before driving away alone. 2 days later, the poor child cannot survive the hunger and cold and tragically dies in the field. The direction the supervisor gave her was completely wrong. This incident is based on real events in a textile factory, and in order to resist 12-hour rotating shifts and the life of labor like slavery, the female workers led by Esther decide to call on their fellow workers to oppose the oppression together. They open the locked dormitory doors and rush out bravely, only to encounter the supervisor in the corridor. Seeing the workers about to revolt, the supervisor quickly shuts another gate and rushes to the residence of the boss's wife to report the emergency. But the supervisor has not only abused the workers, he has also caused the death of a 12-year-old girl, making him the true culprit behind the entire tragedy. Soon the female workers storm toward the residence in fury, paying no attention to the old lady as they search for the hateful supervisor. Many of the girls carry tools in their hands, and the supervisor, who is usually known for his cruelty, becomes frightened and quickly hides in a concealed place. When Esther and the other workers arrive and cannot find him, she immediately orders everyone to search separately, determined to uncover him no matter what. Before long, Lucy discovers the hiding supervisor, but he locks himself inside, and no matter how hard the people outside try, they cannot open the iron door. At that moment, the old lady arrives and asks everyone to remain calm, promising to invite the local judge to bring officials so the law can deliver a fair decision. But Esther believes that even the law often stands with wealth and power, and no one truly protects workers at the bottom. She also believes the old lady herself is a hypocrite. Although she constantly claims to sympathize with the poor, she owns a plantation on a small island where enslaved black workers labor for her. Behind her gentle appearance hides a darker heart than anyone expects. Esther therefore refuses to obey her orders and instructs some workers to guard the watermill house so the supervisor cannot escape. The rest of them follow her to the labor union in England. At the same time, the union leader is speaking to a crowd about a proposal for an 8-hour working day where workers leave once their shift ends. They do not need to beg Parliament and do not need to obey the will of factory owners. As long as workers unite together, the system of exploiting labor and withholding wages cannot shake the rights of ordinary people. At that moment, Esther arrives with several workers. She asks whether the girls present have also experienced employers deliberately falsifying their ages on labor contracts to extend their unpaid labor. Just then, a woman from Liverpool arrives holding the notice Esther once posted, and she turns out to be the family member Esther has been searching for all these years. After 17 years apart, both sides cannot stop the tears. The birth certificate she brings proves that Esther is indeed 17 years old, clearly showing that the employer altered her real age. The young master, worried that the matter will create further trouble, begs Esther not to reveal the truth to the union, fearing it will destroy the reputation of the textile factory. His favored 12-hour work system would also be dragged into controversy, but this time Esther refuses to bow to wealth and power and chooses to take control of her own fate, honestly telling the union members her real age with renewed hope.
My name is Esther Price. I was born in Liverpool on the 8th of March 1816. I am 17. I've got an older sister called Martha. I needed to know this. I needed to know.
Meanwhile, when the magistrate arrives at the watermill house to capture the supervisor responsible for the tragedy, the place is already empty. The man has escaped through a drainage outlet, leaving the question of whether his crimes will ever face justice. That night, all the workers gather together and force the young master to burn the indenture contracts in exchange for allowing the spinning factory to continue operating. For the first time, the workers at the bottom achieve victory, although the struggle is difficult. Even a small step forward represents a giant leap in the collective strength of labor, and a good beginning will inevitably push society toward progress. The rights enjoyed by workers today are the fruits of the struggles fought by those who came before.
Heaven will smile upon us. Posterity shall applaud us. And when our hour comes, and we have to quit this vale of tears and go to our great account, we shall look back to the struggles we have made in the cause of justice, peace, and kindness. Our last moments will be cheered by the reflections that we have contributed something to chase vice, injustice, and oppression from the earth. And we shall go down to our graves with peace and satisfaction, knowing that we have bequeathed a brighter and a happier inheritance to our children than it was our lot to be born to.
Fate eventually turns full circle, because when the young master returns home the next day, the old owner, who had always been the only fair figure in the factory, learns of his son's actions and dies from shock and anger. With this, the story of the spinning mill comes to an end. This drama is based on real historical events from the Quarry Bank Mill in Cheshire. It portrays the harsh reality of industrial exploitation at the end of the Industrial Revolution and explores themes such as workers' rights, safety in textile production, child labor laws, and the political movements that fought to improve these conditions. Welcome to subscribe to my channel, and see you in the next episode.